It's February 1st, 2012. It's the first Wednesday of the month, which means we have the benefit of James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. I always look forward to these shows. James, welcome back. Good to have you.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it, and I'm sad we missed January, but I think things
you stood me up, dude.
I stood you up. There were so many things kind of swirling around between work and home and the website.
I've stood you up, though, before as well.
I think you've double booked me once, I think, but that's
double booked. Is that what it was?
I think that's all.
Oh, brother, the listeners got to realize that we do this as a volunteer service, and we're not perfect. So, anyways, I don't want to spend any more time on that. I want to get into a few of the stories that we have planned today. This is just our short segment, but before I do that, let me mention in a egotistical moment here. No, it's not about my ego, but I'm happy about this. There still is a lot of feedback coming from my Rudolph the Red-Nosed Giuliani confrontation. I was just on Truth Exposed Radio in Austin, Texas, talking about this. A opinion column, James, and I'll send you the link here during the break. This is pretty cool. An opinion column today was published in the newspaper about the event, and the title was "Giuliani Should Welcome 9/11 Questions." Let me read through this because it was a real pleasant surprise that a writer for a lamestream rag actually, and whoever this columnist is, actually did a fair job in talking about the confrontation. Last Thursday, Rudy Giuliani talked about leadership and was led astray when a man had some questions about the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The man stood up and demanded, "What happened with Building 7, Rudolph?" The man had a good question, even though he asked it in the wrong way by interrupting Giuliani's talk. Well, let me mention, again, just in case you didn't hear this, the only reason why I interrupted, James, is because they changed the question and answer session so that you had to write the questions in ahead of time to be screened for him to answer. Previously, in all the other events that the university had, you could go up to a microphone, just like the John Kerry event, in which it was later an infamous event of the "Don't Tase Me" incident. Don't tase me, bro. Who I spoke to him, by the way, the other day. He's still pretty active writing. And anyways, the article goes on to say that another audience member got up and said similar thing, and Giuliani responded, "Oh, get lost, let's see. I wanted to read to you that this article says that he brings up three really great points. He says, first, may I suggest Rogaine to you, Mr. Giuliani, because Giuliani told me to get a haircut. And then he highlights the fact that he says, well, do you see the pointlessness of an ad hominem attack? Which I'm glad he mentioned.
Nice.
Then he says, may I suggest you not mocking a fellow American who was asking a sincere question regarding a day of such great tragedy of 9/11. And third, to anyone convinced our government is incapable of lying to its constituency, may I suggest an education, or perhaps you can simply make a Google search on the Gulf of Tonkin incident and Operation Northwoods. Can you believe it?
Nice. See, I think that shows that there are people out there who, if hopefully they can slip it under the radar, or they're just, that well-known a writer and they've got the wherewithal, that they can bring up these issues.
It was pretty cool, James. I was pretty excited to see it. All right, we got to take a quick break, and then we'll jump into the Media Monarchy News Blitz in just a moment with our special guest tonight, James Evan Pilato. Hold that thought. We'll get into it in just seconds, folks. It's the Bob Tuskin Show. So many things going on. Let's try this again. So many things going on in the world today, and we could really go here, there, and everywhere. But I'll let you highlight some of the things that you find to be at the moment most relevant. Go ahead, James.
Well, I was going to say, we were talking in the break. We skipped our January appearance, so there's no way, one, that we could go over, the month or two news that we missed, because even just in a day's news anymore, as it seems like things kind of speed up. There's just the Facebook millions, so of course that brings up, or it should, but it doesn't, bring up all the kinds of things about their connections and what they do and their CIA fundraising money and all those kind of intelligence connections. And then we see, and I think a lot of what I try and do on Media Monarchy and all the sites is kind of see these themes And you can call it, coincidence or synchromysticism, or just paying attention and spotting the, the signs and the symbols and the repetitions. There are, I believe, at present moment, 74 dead in Egypt's worst soccer disaster. I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm not a sports person, but I find stories like this interesting as we're about to have our big Super Bowl here in the States. So even, Bob, I guess what I'm just trying to say, even just one day of news, like you do a radio show every day. I know I could easily fill hours every day if I had the time and the wherewithal and the ability to do it. There's just no shortage of things to go over.
There never is. And even doing the show 5 days a week, James, I still find things that I want to do off the air and when I'm not on. And, well, that's what the Intel Hub News Briefs are now. We've made this podcast series, and I hope we get you on one of those to include, just a short brief to fit it in. And I know you have many different projects that you have to fit in the various news articles and news stories, and one of which is New World Next Week. I'm messing this up.
No, that's it. NewWorldNextWeek.com with
okay,
James
cool.
Corbett. Yeah. And actually, I feel it's been great news over the last few weeks. For whatever reason, 2 weeks ago, we put up our 99th episode, and we led with the SOPA blackout story, with all the the websites kind of blacking out content and this kind of big online push. So I think covering the SOPA protest on New World Next Week as it was kind of going on, because there was massive online interest at the time. That episode, it probably got about 10,000 views or so. So then, leading into the next episode, which is the one that's up right now, we're gonna shoot a new one here in just about an hour or so, episode 101. But we put up episode 100 and discussed what was, again, at the moment, a breaking and developing story about the latest SEAL Team 6 psychological operation on Somalia. And that episode, when I last glanced at it, it's at, I think, 34,000 plus views and counting. So it's been this just exponential, view, and audience explosion. So that makes me, in a way, kind of feel the pressure on myself to say, well, now if that many more people are watching, I want to make sure that, I've got it all together and that we're doing the best thing that we can possibly do. But again, like you said, so many of us are pretty much one-man bands.
All right. Let's go to this very fascinating article you have here posted at MediaMonarchy.com, Room 237, a documentary with theories about The Shining. Tell us more.
This is, again, to mention synchromysticism, and again, what I feel like at its essence, or at my most kind of ideal way, what media monarchy is kind of to me, and what it represents is, we've talked about this a million times. I've always been a big media junkie, film and music and theater and art and all of those things. So to see those connections in the real world, whether it is, the films, that I'm watching, or the music, or what's on television, and just all those things around, to see those patterns, not just in a newspaper, but in all around, in the multimedia and the meta media. I'd been noticing and had, a few links, and a few folks send me links to videos and some things about Jay Widener, who fans of Red Ice Radio may know. And he has been working on, and he's put out part 1 of what's called Kubrick's Odyssey, how Kubrick helped NASA fake the moon landings. And I find this, the whole area fascinating, if it's, from space to Earth and film. And of course, admittedly, a bit of speculation. But I'd been watching this documentary recently, and then just a couple of days later, I read the newspapers at work and look at the Oregonian and look at the New York Times. And there's an article in the New York Times, which is what I've posted up in part in this article, Room 237, documentary with theories about The Shining. And there's basically a bigger budget version that just opened. It was an official selection at Sundance, which just wrapped, I believe, just a few days ago. And it's making the, film festival circuits. And it's a film exclusively about The Shining and all of the theories through all of the years. Now, Kubrick's Odyssey, which Jay Widener made, he essentially just boils it down. I'll make it simple for you. When the military-industrial complex saw what he did with Dr. Strangelove. They made him an offer he couldn't refuse in helping them fake the Apollo footage. Now, Jay Weidner nor myself think that, we didn't go to the moon. Just a lot of the footage is bogus. And Kubrick was basically doing 2001 the same time NASA was ramping up the Apollo missions, almost, concurrently production-wise. And The Shining is Kubrick's sort of confession of it all. And that's where does get speculative. But the New York Times writes, and I boil it down to just mention the part about Jay Weidner. But in part, it reads, when The Shining was released in 1980, many viewers, including famous film critic Pauline Kael, left the theater mystified by what they've just seen. 3 decades on, scholars and fans are still trying to decipher this puzzle of a film directed by Stanley Kubrick. Room 237, the first full-length documentary by the director Rodney Asher, examines several of the most intriguing of these theories. It's really about the Holocaust, one interviewee says, and Mr. Kubrick's inability to address the horrors of the final solution on film. No, it's about a different genocide, that of American Indians, another one says, pointing to all the tribal theme items adorning the Overlook Hotel's walls. And a third claims it's really Kubrick's veiled confession that he helped NASA fake the Apollo moon landings. The documentary's biggest leap of faith comes with Jay Weidner, who posits that Mr. Kubrick helped NASA fake the Apollo moon landings, then used The Shining to both confess his involvement and brag about it. Mr. Weidner is at work on a DVD about the Kubrick-Apollo connection, his second one, and cites as evidence a sweater worn by Danny with Apollo 11 on it, and the hexagonal design on the hotel hallway carpet pattern, which they use on the movie poster for 237. And Weidner argues is a dead ringer, of course, for the Apollo launch pad. The entire sub-story of The Shining, Mr. Weidner said in an interview, is the story of Kubrick making the Apollo footage and then trying to hide it from his wife and then her finding out about it. I know there's so many other angles of every Kubrick film you could probably break down and do an analysis on how it connects to the sort of New World Order structure. He seemed to be one who was in the know, but somehow was trying to talk about it, maybe like Huxley or Eric Blair. What do you think, Bob?
I think Newt Gingrich is going to go put us on the moon
That's
with a new
it.
base. It's funny because I've often speculated about moon bases. This is a conspiracy theory for Coast to Coast AM.
It is.
All right, James, we'll get back into it in just a little bit. As you can see, the clock is clicking here before we have to take just a quick commercial break. And then we'll be back with more. James Evan Pilato, our special guest, MediaMonarchy.com.